Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for joining. Today, the Listen to the Experts webinar is around improving IT service management with self-service, and we're very lucky to have Steve Beaumont with us today, who's our Product Development Director at PowerON. Steve is also an MVP, so he's extremely skilled in these areas. If you do have any questions, please either raise them as you're going through and I'll highlight them to Steve, or failing that, if you just wait till the end and then Steve will be able to give you that direct feedback as well and give you some answers and point you in the right direction. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Steve. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So good afternoon, everybody. So as Catherine's just mentioned, my name is Steve Beaumont. I'm the Product Development Director at PowerON Platforms. Been around in the IT industry probably a little bit longer than I want to admit these times. Very heavy background within the local government sector, which is where I originally started. As Catherine did highlight, I am also Microsoft MVP within the cloud and data center management teams. So any product feedbacks, etc., love to hear, love to try and make the products better, as well as being able to obviously go and talk quite often, as I tend to like to talk quite a lot. And then obviously blogging and authoring of books and so forth. I'm quite active within the community, quite obviously we've been MVP, so you can find me on Twitter at StevieBSC, as well as the various blogging platforms either across our corporate platform or my own personal one. A little bit of shameless self-promotion as well. I have been lucky enough to work on a series of the cookbooks from PAC-T around the System Center products, including the new one that's just been released around System Center Service Manager 2016. So available from all good stockists. So today we are going to talk around the fact of how we can utilize System Center Service Manager to help deliver self-service, get that idea around why IT service management can be used to improve the service that you deliver to your end customers, as well as introducing the new HTML5 portal within Service Manager, and then how we generally tend to utilize that in terms of building up the service catalog of the offerings that we produce, and then some other areas around how we actually drive the adoption and the usage of the portal to make it work for both IT and the customer. As Catherine says, there will be a Q&A session at the end, so if you do have any questions, feel free to raise them. If you have any that are pressing while I'm busy talking about things or doing some of the demos, please do put them into the chat pane and we'll make sure that they get highlighted to me so I can help explain stuff in more clarity if needs be. So obviously I work at PowerON Platforms. Now we formed the company basically from what we call a collection of industry veterans, which actually tends to mean that we've been doing this for far too long but enjoy it far too much. And we are very much that IT management and cloud automation specialist. So we're not a generalist Microsoft partner that deals with everything under the sun from Exchange and SharePoint to Office 365. We focus in on the Microsoft System Center products, the newer Azure platforms in terms of the monitoring aspects, the site-to-site VPNs and the IaaS platforms, as well as how we can automate a load of the solutions utilizing things like PowerShell and design state configuration. But we tend to very much make sure that we listen to the business requirements rather than just going after the new shiny tools. And as we mentioned, MVPs and that community aspect is a very good, strong point within our business that we like to make sure that customers get the most benefit out of the technologies that they are investing in. So, we're going to talk about self-service and very specifically around the service manager element of that. But as we do start to talk around the wider System Center suite, to give you a bit of background, and it is about how we can utilize the products in a life cycle management aspect covering the different areas. And there are multiple components to the actual solution from Microsoft. Now, we tend to reference around the fact that Service Manager is kind of fitting in the middle between all the other different components and the other different systems within your environment. And using Orchestrate is kind of that glue that holds all the different parts of the infrastructure together in terms of taking information that can help populate the CMDB to give you a rich base of information to work from, helping interact with things like Virtual Machine Manager to deploy out infrastructure, or making sure that anything that goes wrong in the environment in terms of monitoring for operations manager gets highlighted as an actual service management item, so usually going to be an incident or problem, to actually make sure you can drive it through from end to end when things happen within the environment. So this piece sitting in the middle is great. Like I say, it's the glue that we can pull all this information in and we can start interacting with the different pieces. But from purely an IT perspective, that's only one part of the puzzle. As we try and introduce this concept of self-service, we want to be able to make it as easy as possible for users to gain very quick and efficient access to services, which means that we can actually drive them through without having multiple touch points, running backwards and forwards, gathering information. So we add on the actual self-service layer to the actual service manager piece to make it an easy interface for customers to interact with IT and get access to the services that you offer. So this importance of self-service is starting to raise its profile more and more as we go through the years. And it is that idea of being able to actually look at how we target individual services to the right areas of the organisation. So having a fully populated service catalogue in terms of everything you offer is one thing. Having a portal that is so overwhelmed with the amount of information that is available from IT can be very daunting. So being able to make sure that if there is only certain parts, so requesting virtual machines, for example, would be pretty pointless to put out to the wider business, because it's just something that they're not going to actually go and consume. So removing that, targeting it down to say, well, actually, we only want to make that available to either our development team or maybe second line support, makes it a much more focused and targeted offering for your services. When you're starting to design this self-service catalogue as well, it's also important to have a starting point. It's no good just going through and trying to find random things that you think might be useful. It's actually about analysing the metrics within your environment to identify where them hotspots are, where we can potentially reduce the time it takes for IT to either turn them around, or the time that's involved in having to go through and check simple information, and make sure that we structure them in a way that can be done. The other main thing is part of the self-service is not just simply filling out forms and being able to gather information, it's also trying to enable the actual end users, apologies for that popping up, actually trying to enable end users to better understand and be able to fix their own problems. So introducing this concept of a knowledge base into self-service as well greatly helps the end users not necessarily even have to log a call, but understand everything from easy process information that they need to understand, how to turn a computer on and off when it's broken. And it's part of this shift left service strategy, which means that IT don't have to be involved within every step of the process. A lot of the time IT get put on the hook for things that are not necessarily a technical issue. For example, if a member of staff needed to access a certain part of the internet, so maybe they're needing to do some research on guns and ammo, and that was blocked by a corporate policy, yes, IT might need to specifically put them into a group to allow access, but is it IT that actually make that decision of whether that staff member is allowed to access that site? So by trying to take this approach of delegating back down a lot of the responsibilities and the decisions makings to the wider business, it means that we can reduce a lot of the work that IT does in terms of having to chase around, get authorization requests, and work out whether things are allowed in the first place. So it's this idea of trying to both give back to the business to allow them to do their normal business processes and authorizations, empowering users to try and actually solve stuff themselves or request services in a timely and orderly manner, and being able to specifically target relevant parts of the organization with the stuff that they need, rather than just having a massive service catalog that they have to filter through. So, as I mentioned earlier, this usage increase of self-service is continuously increasing over time. So from the Forrester researchers, we saw that back in 2012, still fairly recently, we was hovering around about the 67% mark. Now on the last survey that was done back in 2014, that had already jumped up quite significantly to 73%. And the latest reports that are starting to come through, that's only increasing over time. Now, a lot of the time organisations kind of have this worry about the adoption profile of self-service. Will parts of the organisation be able to actually understand it? Will they use it? And again, from the Forrester research, it is actually something that customers are likely to be doing. So if we use the example of the whole online purchasing, then if they can't find their answers quickly, they will abandon the usage of that portal. So structure and design and the wording of these portals is very paramount. Lots of technical jargon is just not going to cut it for non-technical employees. This has to be structured in a manner that's very clear, very concise, and very easy to access. And again, the older generation that sometimes think, well, they're quite unsure, they might not want to use this, they prefer to pick up the phone. The same sort of rules apply even more to them. If it isn't something that is easily and quick to be able to interact with your organisation, they do get more dissatisfaction than having a portal which they can go to and actually get access to them services, as long as it's easy and understandable to use. So some of the reasons that we start to look around utilising self-service is not only the things that I've been talking around in terms of making it easier for IT, but also on that back end of the infrastructure where we might have lots of different systems. How do we have, well, we might already have multiple ways to capture information. There might be a portal over here, there might be one thing that we do for commissioning new virtual machines again, there might be another one for going and requesting from procurement a particular type of kit. We might have a HR system that we use to actually go and onboard new users. So trying to bring them into a consolidated portal of specific offerings that IT offer as a service to the business, as well as trying to eliminate things like manual forms, things like change requests where we have to go through, fill out a Word document, send it across via email, wait for somebody to reply via email but then miss a thread. Again, just trying to bounce procurement forms around the system isn't as efficient as having it in a streamlined process driven from a single place. And I mentioned earlier that data quality aspect, very important to make sure that when we are asking for things like, well, what's your new line manager going to be, or you've got married and you're changing your name, making sure that we capture structured information, eliminating wherever possible things like typographical errors, making sure that information is selected based on objects rather than just free text, makes a big difference to what we can do with that data as it transfers across into the IT team. And that call chasing side, as I mentioned, being able to actually make sure that there are mandatory questions that are asked. So rather than relying on people that have worked for long enough within the service desk environment to know that what the process is to be able to ask them in the first place, making sure that we don't pass calls around the environment with missing vital information, or that we have to go backwards and forwards talking to the customer to repetitively gather that information or verify that information, makes a big difference if the self-service is structured in a manner that enforces that capture of information. And as I mentioned, it's not just IT's responsibility. Being able to have a flow and a system that does approvals within the process, so making sure that we don't just say, well, fine, here, fill out a form and you automatically get it, but putting that onus back to the business to say, you can have this service, but your line manager or somebody within HR or senior management must approve this request before IT even consider doing anything within it. Again, makes a huge difference. So I'm going to jump into the HTML5 portal in a second. A couple of things I want to highlight though. Self-service within Service Manager has been around for a while. So ever since they first released this in the 2010 release, it's had a version of self-service. Now, some people that may have experienced this will know that it could have been quite clunky beforehand. And one of the main things was the fact that it was Silverlight based. With Microsoft changing to pure HTML5, it makes a world of difference without needing to have plugins in there. It's based around the fact that it's common industry standards. There's also the fact that now it will work on any device. So as mobile devices become more and more prevalent within the environment, people will be connected to Wi-Fi. You might have field engineers that want to be able to log a call quickly for somebody. So being able to pick up a mobile device such as a phone or a tablet Tablets are probably a little bit better to log stuff on than just a mobile phone. The portal doesn't need any extra work in terms of it being able to re-render to the equivalent type of device that it's sat on. Let's pop into the portal. He says not being able to get it up on screen. Come on. Here we go. So this is the self-service portal from Microsoft. As I mentioned before, having this idea and this reference of a service catalog, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a little while, makes it easy for users to be very quickly spot what type of top-level category they're utilizing. Each one of these service offerings within the actual catalog will have multiple request offerings underneath it. So you can think of these as the categories. These are the top level series of information. You see, it allows us to structure out things like what costs are involved in this, whether we're going to be having service level agreements attached to it that defines how quickly we're going to be responding to these type of requests. Whereas the individual requests themselves actually drive into much more that structured format of capturing the information. So all of these are rendered as HTML forms, but it doesn't mean that you need to know HTML to utilize this. This is driven from within Service Manager. There's a simple GUI interface with a series of steps that you go through in a wizard basis of just defining out what your individual questions are going to be. Now, I mentioned we have this ability. Hopefully I can zoom in, maybe not today. We have this little asterisk at the side, which is just simply highlighting that we can set some stuff as mandatory. So if I try to submit a form without filling in relevant questions, that will be highlighted back to the end user. So if I go through a case of entering this, so starter's first name for this example is going to be Donald Duck. We don't have a middle name. What's job title? Is going to be our new T-boy. And then we have a simple list. Now this is where utilizing some of the other aspects of Service Manager really starts to come into play. So I mentioned earlier, if I wanted to know what the user's new starters manager is going to be, trying to eliminate the capabilities where somebody might type in something random. So I could have a text field here and just type in, it's going to be Mickey Mouse as the line manager. That doesn't give us as much capability when we try to look at things like automation of the processes to actually work with that. So we'd have to have so much data validation in the background, or somebody will have to pick that up and go and actually look for that user within Active Directory. That it's much better to actually utilize the information that we already have within the CMDB within Service Manager. So I have all of my Active Directory users already contained within my CMDB. What I've done is I've applied a filter that says depending on the department that you actually select, it will filter the relevant users with the word sales contained within Active Directory under their department to allow me to select an object. So for example, if I go back to Technical Services and select Harry Loughton as my user, now I've enabled the column to be able to show us some more richer details, but you can see it's pulling all of this rich information dynamically from Active Directory, and it allows us to actually see all the details such as where that person is located, what the phone numbers are, and so on and so forth. So by selecting an actual object from the CMDB, it means that we can now have all of that detail to hand for processes like automation, or to allow whoever does pick up this call in a manual aspect to again just be able to double click on the object on the call that's logged and be able to interact with it. So if I provide the justification as my last question, I don't particularly need to upload any files at this point, but I can submit that request. So we'll see that actually gives us notification in terms of the ID, and then the user's put back to the portal. Now, I'll come on to notifications earlier, but that flashing up there just very briefly wasn't the most helpful. When I dive into notifications, I'll explain why that's not too bad with it only briefly displaying. But we do have the other sections within the portal, such as the My Request section, where again, as an end user, I can now go back to that call that I logged, and I can start to see everything in terms of the communication that's going on and the different activities. The other section on here is the My Activities section, where already I have a task to go and perform. So even as a non-IT user, I can be given things to go and approve within the system. So this is that request I logged a minute ago. I can dive into that, and I can start to see all the details, and then I can interact as an end user and work with IT to move this process on. Now, in terms of the service manager side, this is built around the idea of a service catalog. So this is building up both, as I mentioned, the service offerings, the bits that contain all that top level information in terms of what services we offer, the SLAs around it, the actual costs involved, whereas we also have the request offerings, which are the doing part of it. So if I look at that one that I've just been using as an example, you can see that building these up is just simply a case of walking through the wizard and filling out the various pieces that are required, such as the questions. So if I wanted to add a new question to this form, I could click the simple plus and say, what is your hair colour? Not that I can spell colour. Colour. Make it a required option or optional, and make sure that I type it in as text, or one of the various options that I had previously. Now, one other thing that is within the portal, when it comes back on screen, is related to help articles. So talk about that knowledge base side. They can actually dive into it and have that rich display around what they can do to try and self-service again their actual problems, all nice rich detailed graphics. So this is something that I literally copied and pasted out of a Word document into Service Manager, and then it's rendered the contents in that nice rich text format, almost verbatim. One other new thing that was introduced is this concept of being able to favorite items. So I can click the little heart, and that will add it onto my main page right at the front. So if there are stuff that I use on a regular basis, and I have a demo fail and it doesn't appear, but can always trust the demo gods. Let me try favoriting something else and see if we can kick it into life. There we go. So that will favorite the item to the actual main front page. Not quite sure why my knowledge base article didn't appear on it. And the other item that's been added is the ability to again share information. So as the user does find something that they use regularly, so maybe we have a telephony issue, clicking on the share link will generate a direct link to this that can be emailed out. So it'll open up Outlook or your favorite mail application with a direct hyperlink to this specific page that people can send around to colleagues. And that could be something that IT is trying to do to help users, say go and click on this and go and use it, or it could be something that internally individual colleagues that are end users are actually utilizing as well. So, talking about building that service catalog, you showed me going very briefly in terms of the back end of Service Manager and have that section that shows you the distinct service offerings and request offerings, and the fact that they can be in various states. So as you're designing them, they'll be in draft, moving it through into published. But one thing that I do want to kind of call out is that it's not necessarily, in that truest ITIL term, a full IT service catalog. So ITIL will try to define the fact that you should record everything that your organisational does. This could be everything from disaster recovery, business continuity plans, financials, contracts. They don't live within the Service Manager side. If you think about them, that they are basically documents that should be stored within something like SharePoint. They are information that the business uses to run its service, whereas Service Manager is very much focused around providing this top layer of the pyramid, this user request view. So actually looking to make sure that we present out a method to consume a way to log both incidents, so something's broke, I have an issue, as you'll see within the portal, and then requests I would like. And there is that very, very strong distinction. Within Service Manager, they are even separate classes altogether, and you cannot just transfer easily from one to another. Something's broken, I need. Two very distinct areas. And it's how you look to find that best method to structure your offerings. So like I said, making sure that it's not just all categorized within one and you just have one item on the left hand side of the portal saying general offerings and then 1,000 different request offerings, but how do we break it down into very easily understandable logical areas? So we have lots of things that are related to users or accounts, lots of things that are related to email systems. So I'd like to expand my mailbox, for example. And it is about providing that transparency to customers. I said right at the very beginning, it's about making sure that we're not just putting in another further layer of overhead to it. It's about reducing that. How we can actually make sure that we communicate out the progress constantly to users, trying to avoid somebody logging a call 5 minutes later, ringing the service desk. Is it done yet? Is it done yet? What about this? Do you need this? Making sure we have that reviews and the authorization stage within it. Making sure it's not just a free-for-all scenario. Looking where if we are going to bring in automation behind it to streamline it even more, that we have that check gate within the solution. And I did mention also about starting to look at how we provide out or how we do notifications. How do we let users know that something is going on, that something's happened, maybe something is about to happen? If I go back to the portal again, so that call that I logged earlier, so I have in here both that new starter request. You can see that we have all these individual steps. Maybe if the user puts a comment on there, it's usually going to be, is this done yet? So I've actually given myself more time than what most end users would do. So a little bit more than 5 or 6 minutes. But again, we can see it. There's a raft of information that the end user can consume. But more importantly is this section. This is the business process. These are the steps involved in requesting a new user. And we can see at the minute that it is in this verify and approve state. And as you saw, because I logged it and I am also an authorizer of this request, I have that authorization within here. So if I go through here now and say, go on then, open board, and approve this, then that will move us on to the next process. And the one thing I should have clicked on a second ago is that while, yes, I can verify that there is a request for a new starter, it's the fact that for a non-IT person, they can still see all of the information that was added to this request by the end user when it was logged. Now, that's covering off some of the idea of seeing the information flow, the different steps involved. If I go back into Service Manager and just find that request very quickly. So we should have, from an IT perspective, an open call. Here we go, open service requests. And it should be this top one. So we can see that the analyst can see the different comments and stuff that were going on. They can see the different parts that happened. So we just went and did the actual votes for it. We can communicate back to the user. I didn't set an initial priority for this. Let me just set a low priority. And then that call notification should again appear against the actual request. So obviously I'm logged on with both portals on my own name. That would generally be somebody else, but we can communicate backwards and forwards to the end user without necessarily needing to ring them or chase them or have the phone calls. Or for the end user, more importantly, they don't have to wait in line on the phone. Now, another form of communications is we have this little option at the top where you can see I currently have 4, including something red, which is never good. Now, that colour will change depending on the severity of what we call the notifications. So I currently have a critical payroll outage. So that's why that's just highlighting the fact that, yes, there are 4 notifications within the portal at the minute, but the top level roll-up is there is currently a critical outage. Now, thankfully, we have got our best Smurfs on this and we're busy to get it working, as well as being able to make sure that we inform people about things like the fact that we have an email system outage up and coming. So therefore, we're going to be doing some work between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. So again, it's just another method of being able to promote information back to the end users. The main reason for trying to keep people informed by this method is to, again, eliminate the need to people to ring the service desk. If payroll went down, you don't want to have several hundred people calling the service desk. Get a notification out, let people know without abusing the email system and sending emails to the entire company. The other aspect of this is, as I mentioned earlier, when this was first logged, that number flashed up very quickly. So introducing the idea of being able to send out notifications via email. So when we have what we call a subscription set up, just dive into this. If my internet will hold up for 2 minutes longer, it'll be appreciated. So I have a specific new instant notification. Now, rather than going into my email, I do have this nice little button to be able to test that template. So I've done this one based on an incident rather than a service request. If I bring up the template, you can see that not only do we have a nice email that we can send out to actual end users that contains all the information regarding what incident number they're using, when it was logged, what the actual descriptions are, but we can hyperlink wherever possible the information to try and drive them so that as soon as they click on that call or that hyperlink, it will take them back to the self-service portal. So trying to make sure that they don't just get notified and then they ring back up or reply to the email, but making it very easy wherever possible to say, go check that out in the actual self-service portal, interact wherever we can. Which basically leads me onto this slide. So there's only so many times that when somebody rings up and says, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Can I have access yet? Have you checked the self-service portal? Or hang on for another 5 minutes while I go into it and try and dig through and make sure what the actual status updates are. The end users will get to see what's actually in the progress of that call unless they happen to get the person on the phone that was dealing with that a lot quicker than somebody digging through and trying to find it. I mentioned about them notifications, so making sure that not doing overkill of email notifications. There is nothing worse than doing too much email notifications, because if every single thing that happened, every note that was put on it sent out an email, people will just turn them off or they'll set up filter rules to make sure that they go into the junk folder. So being very specific about key points, such as when a call is created. You saw that it flashed up very quickly. Send them an email. They have that then in their mailbox. They can refer to it, make it as visual as possible, so they see it, they digest it at a very quick glance, and then have them links in there to make sure that it pushes them back to the portal wherever possible. So I'm coming to about the end of the main demos. Catherine, have we had any initial questions within the chat channels?
No, nothing. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, So let me do one at a time. So Cameron's asked, is there a way to send notifications to a user's desktop rather than email?
Not natively out of the box, no. Um, so the favourite partner that tends to do a lot of this lot would be Cyerson. I'm not sure whether they have an individual desktop notification for end users. I think they have one for analysts when you're assigned a call, etc. I don't think they have one directly related to end users, but I can double check that. Now, there is a lot of stuff that you can do within Service Manager, either via PowerShell, the SDK, or Orchestrator. There may be a way to create a very simple application, or if it's Windows 10, interact with the push notification service to push something to the desktop, but not natively.
Cool. So Stephen's asked, can you demonstrate the Exchange connector, i.e. how SCSM can capture email responses from users?
I can't necessarily demonstrate it within this environment because I am in my main demo environment. I don't particularly want to go into live at the minute, especially with the session's recorded and it's got customer data in it. However, I can certainly very easily talk about it. So you do have the ability to monitor a mailbox. Now, there are a couple of challenges with this. I may not be able to open this connector due to a lovely update rollup one bug. Let me see if it will come up. Oh no, it has. Fine. So the Exchange connector has one limitation, well, a couple of limitations. The main limitation is it will log anything that comes into this mailbox as an incident. There's not a lot we can do about that. You cannot differentiate. There's no intelligence that's possible to make sure that it says, well, actually, based on what you're typing in the body, right, you're actually a service request. So things that come in via email will always be incidents. So I tend to say that wherever possible, limit the interaction with the service desk via email because it's almost garbage in, garbage out. This is why self-service is so important, because you're structuring the questions that gets asked. You're directing and coercing a user down a specific route. The next one is when users do reply to emails, it's based around these parsing keywords. So a lot of the time, if a user is replying to an email, it's not within that bit. So when a user replies to an email, so that initial email that I showed a second ago that went out would generate a subject. If I can bring that back up quickly, it will generate a subject with the incident number associated to it. New incident. So test this template. So the subject line would be this piece. So it has that incident number in square brackets. Now, as long as a user doesn't modify that subject line and they just simply reply to that email, then it will append that email as a comment to the main call. If you then send the user a comment, so it's either going to send them an email with that comment attached or just simply say go to the portal and reply to that comment. If they reply again to that email, then it will still keep it as long as it has the reference number in square brackets. Now, sensibly, so the Exchange connector can work out that if it's got SR for service request or RA for an approval or something, it will append it to the right place, but only on initial ones can it understand that it's, or it can't understand anything, it just knows it's going to be an incident. And this is why we recommend putting things like make sure that you put notes in there that says don't modify the subject line, so it allows it to automatically process it. If the user doesn't have that within the subject line, it will log it as a new incident. I hope that answers the question.
I've got another couple of questions on here actually, Steve, as well. So Russell's asked, the out-of-the-box reporting is painful in SCSM. Are there any hints that you can point me to make it easier, e.g. any Power BI dashboards out there?
Oh, I couldn't have set that question up any better if I'd asked someone to type it for me. So, absolutely. So rather strangely, if you go to PowerOnPlatforms.com, let me bring that one up as well if my internet will allow me. So within the PowerON Platforms main website, there is a section under Solutions called Power BI. And as I said, we are a focused specialist partner. That doesn't mean we do lots of generic Power BI services, but guess what? We do Power BI across System Center. So when the website decides to load, here we go. So go to Offerings Power BI. You'll find that there are currently two main offerings. I think at this point I would have been quicker tethering off my phone. So there's Configuration Manager one, and there is also a Service Manager dashboard as well. Now, being from a Yorkshire background, having the word free in there is always good to see. So these dashboards, they do come with a community edition. Now, the author of these is one of my staff, and that's Rafael Delgado. He has done a wonderful job on putting together a set of instructions, a set of notes, so you can follow these through to basically run them locally on your Power BI desktop version for free as part of the community. There is a further method that can be extended, but this does carry a cost model, mainly a Microsoft cost licensing model as well, because it's based on Power BI using the Pro license. So you can make it a web hosted scenario where hopefully it's going to come up. Hopefully this is going to go to mainly my demo reports and not our entire organization's reports. So while we're waiting for that to load, because it's a little bit slow, is there another question while I get this up on screen?
Yeah, so we have, do you provide training for the SCSM tool? And also another one from Christian, do you provide on-site training for Orchestrator?
Yes, and yes to both of them. So not only do I like to talk for hours and hours, and therefore that means sharing my knowledge, but our staff are very much in that focused area of putting a tool in is a one-time job. Having performance scale and stuff is just about experience. Making sure that we pass on our passion and our operational knowledge around how to use the tool set in the real world is where we really do thrive. So we absolutely love to come and give training, show users how to operationally use this within their environment and not just talk from a textbook. And that applies to both Service Manager and Orchestrator. So before I take any more questions, this is just finishing off that last question around better reporting. So this is the Power BI dashboards that we do. So you can see down here we have the lovely Rafa Delgado that made this. Now, yes, SQL services reporting is very painful, it's a little bit slow at the best of times, unless you put some grunt behind it, but I no longer like it because it is that legacy, flat, static view. The main killer feature for me for Power BI is the fact that I can interact with it. I can click and see a filtered view of all my in-progress events. All my data wraps around that. I can dive into it, I can start to look at metrics, you can start to slice and dice this information. I'm not going to go too deep into this report at the minute because I could spend another 3 hours just talking about this alone, but then you have the different data sets behind this. You can create your own custom queries on it. There is options around, especially if you're using the online Power BI, the Cortana Analytics integration, where you can basically get insights into your data, and you can type in free text searches such as how many email calls have I had, and it will filter out lots of metrics behind the screen without having to design any reports or queries. It will intelligently try to work out the best fit of what you're trying to look for. I hope that answers your question earlier when you said anything better than the static SQL reporting services questions. Any more questions, Catherine?
There aren't, but Russell's typing, so I'm just Just wait and see. Here we go. So Russell again. So one more question about the Power BI dashboard. Is it looking at live data in Service Manager or data that's been exported to the data warehouse server?
So it will always be looking at the data warehouse. So Microsoft really don't like people looking directly at the operational database, because the operational database has got enough to do and it's supposed to be as streamlined and as efficient as possible. Data that's in the data warehouse, there is only a tiny delay as it goes across. So certainly within the later versions you can tune that down and it should be there within about 5 minutes or so. Yes, the analysis cubes only run nightly, but it depends on how you actually do this and where you pull the data from. I hope that answers your question, Russell.
Great, thanks. Great, so I think that's it. Has anyone else got any questions? No? Oh. No, Russell says he's fine. Great, well thanks everyone for joining and thanks Steve. And if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call either, and we're more than happy to help you with any challenge or query you may have. So if that's it from Steve, I'll say thank you very much. Lovely. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks.
Breaking up there slightly, Catherine. So brilliant. Yes, thank you very much everyone for attending. Like I say, if you do want to look at this wider within your business, please feel free to get in touch. There's lots of different ways to fund some of these lot. There's Microsoft planning vouchers that can be leveraged to do a lot of the planning exercises, and there will be more webinars coming up shortly, so make sure you go to our website and subscribe to see what is upcoming within our list of things that we'll be doing. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you all found it useful. We'll see you on the next event, hopefully.